Hey, it's Jeremy with To The Tabletop, and today we're taking a look at another game that is a favorite of mine, and that is Raw. Now, specifically, the version of Raw that I am taking a look at here is the Pharaoh Edition, which has some fancier pieces in it, a few extra little things in here that don't really affect the gameplay, but just look a little bit nicer than the basic version. Raw is a auction game. It's basically, you have this bag that has tiles in them, and yes, this bag is part of gameplay. It's not just a storage bag, and you have these tiles that come out. And these tiles, you're like, what is going on with all these different tiles? Well, you collect tiles. Some of the tiles do things. You're going to auction for these tiles and try to get them. You have these little numbered sun discs that you use as your currency. And you have Raw, who you can invoke. And these weird little game boards here that have all these hieroglyphics going down the sides. What is going on with all of this mess? Well, I'm going to go ahead and try to show you some of that. One thing that's very nice here, the rules for the Pharaoh Edition come on this nice kind of plastic rule book here instead of it being paper. So this is going to really hold up nice. That's a very nice component. Points tokens instead of being little double-sided cardboard ones. They're these nice metal tokens here. The one side is blank because you hide your points and flip them over so the other players can't necessarily remember how many points that you have. And the nice sun tokens and the nice tiles. Raw, the sun boat, this nice board here, and your epic counter here. So the game is played over 3 epics. You have the first epic, which is marked with green, the second epic, which is marked with yellow, and the third epic, which is red. So you have these different game boards here. And the game boards, some of these are double-sided. They're all unique boards, and so the way things work on them is a little bit different. You can see here on these that they are marked right here for the number of players this could be for. So this will be a 2 or 3 player board. This is the second 2 or 3 player board. You have a 3rd player board. So these two for 2 players, this one for 3rd. You would flip these over and this gets you your 4 and 5th player boards. All 3 of these would be used for 4 players. You would throw this one in, which has the 4th and 5th. And finally, that one goes in there if you're playing with 5 players. It's a little interesting, but they were able to set it up to where you can use it for all of them. You'll notice the 4 and 5 player boards have 3 spaces on each of them, whereas the 2 and 3 player boards have 4 spaces on them. There'll be another number up here, which you'll see like 12, 11, and 6 on this one. These basically tell you which of these sundials here start on the board. This one, for example, if you were going to play with 5 players, you would use the 14, the 9, and the 4 as the starting ones. If you were playing with 4 players, you would use the 11, the 8, and the 4 on it. And so that's basically the differences in the numbers here. This is the number of players, and the yellow thing is the sun disk that goes on it. So for your game setup, you're going to figure out which boards you're using. These are all different, so they need to be given out to players randomly. You're going to make sure you have the epic set to the first epic, which is green. You're going to put the sunboat here on the spot corresponding with the number of players, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Also, at the start of the game, everybody starts off with 2 5-point tokens. And you would start off with the correct numbers on all these. Also, the 1 is not going to end up in anyone's board. It's going to start right there. And so that's going to basically start everything. Let me show you what's going on with all these tiles that will correspond with these crazy hieroglyphs down the side here. Okay, so here's all these tiles, and yeah, it took a while to sort these tiles out because there are a lot of them. We're going to go ahead and go down one of the game boards here and show you the different tiles. The tiles on this side, you only keep over an individual epic. Okay, so at the end of every epic, these tiles go away. They are all scored on all 3 epics because you can see we have the green, yellow, and red hourglass for all 3 of these. These 2 here, as you can see on this side with the little infinity, instead of the turning over every epic, these you keep over the whole game. These 2 here will be scored on each epic. As you can see with the green, yellow, and red. This top one here is only scored on the 3rd epic, as is marked by the red. So what is going on with all these? Well, let's start with these on this side, the ones that turn over every epic. These are God tiles. God tiles at the end of each epic. For each of these that you have on your board, you get 2 points. The God tiles have a pretty good use, so you're probably not going to end up with a lot of them in your hand at the end of it, but we'll go over what they're useful for later. These are going to be gold tiles. These are just 3 points for each of the gold tiles that you have. Next are the civilization points. The civilization points work a little bit differently. You'll see here that there are 5 different types of civilization tiles. As you can see here, they've each got a different symbol, also a different color on each of them to help you differentiate with red, yellow, green, blue, and kind of a pinkish color. So at the end of each epic, if you have 3 different types of civilization tiles, you get 5 points. 4 different types of civilization tiles get you 10 points. 5 different types of civilization points get you 15. And if you don't have any, you lose 5 points. So you want to get some. The next we have are going to be the flood tiles. Now the flood tiles and the Nile tiles do look a lot alike by the symbol. The flood tiles have 3 waves at the top. The Nile tiles only have 2, and you can tell the artwork is different on each of these. You get 1 point for each flood tile that you have at the end of every epic, but there's other things that these are useful for when you get over here to these. These are the ones that you keep over the entire game, and you don't get rid of them at the epic. At the end of the epic, these all go away. These will hang around for the whole game. So what is going on with these Nile tiles? Well, if you have at least 1 flood tile, you get 1 point for each of your Nile tiles. If you don't have any flood tiles, you don't get any points for your Nile tiles. It is 1 point for each of your Nile tiles, no matter how many floods you have, as long as you have at least 1. And of course, your flood tiles will disappear at the end of each epic. So every epic, you're going to want to pick up a flood tile to be able to get points for those Niles. The next are going to be the Pharaoh tiles. The Pharaoh tiles are all the same. Now these work a little bit differently. The player, or players if there's a tie, that has the most Pharaoh tiles at the end of each epic will get 5 points. The player or players that have the least amount of Pharaoh tiles at the end of the epic will lose 10 points. If everybody has the exact same number of Pharaoh tiles, then there are just no points done. Now we go into the monument tiles. The monument tiles, as we can see here, are only scored on the 3rd and final epic. So you collect them over the whole game, but you don't get points for them until the end. Now, as you can see here, there are 8 different monument tiles. They are marked at the top with a number. They also have a different illustration on the bottom of them, but you can see these are marked 1 through 8 on the top by the number of lines up there. So how do these work? Well, there's 2 ways you get points for these. So for each group of 3 identical monuments, you get 5 points. For each group of 4 identical monuments, you get 10 points. And for each group of 5 identical monuments, you get 15. There are 5 tiles for each monument. So if you manage to get all 5 of any particular one, you really should get some points. But you also get points on different ones. For each of your individual ones, if you have up to 6 different ones, you get 1 point for each different type of monument. If you have 7 different ones, you get 10 points. And if you manage to have one of all 8 different monuments, you get 15 points. Once again, these are only scored at the end of the epic. The last type of scoring you're going to have is going to be at the end of the final epic, which is going to be based on the value of the sun discs that you have at the end of the game. This will be all sun discs that you have, the flipped over ones, which we'll get into flipping them over here in a bit, but the flipped over ones would flip over and would be points. So it would just add those up. The player or players with the most get 5 points. The player or players with the lowest total lose 5, and if everyone has the same, it is a draw and nobody gets anything. Some other tiles that we have are going to be the disaster tiles, which will be these 4 tiles right here. This one is going to be an earthquake, which will make you lose 2 monuments. This is a death tile that will make you lose 2 pharaohs. This is a drought tile, and you will start by removing flood tiles. If you don't have enough flood tiles, then you start removing Nile tiles. And lastly, you have a plague tile, which takes away some of your culture here, and you will lose 2 cultures. These don't happen when you draw them. These happen when you pick them up in an auction, and we'll go over how that would work. Okay, so this is a lot going on with these tiles here and the scoring. So how do you actually get these tiles? Well, we'll go over what you can do on a turn. So on a turn, you can do 3 different things. The other thing you can do is reach into the bag and pull out a tile. The second thing you could do is invoke Ra. You get to say, I invoke Ra, and you grab this thing and just slam it down in front of you. Third thing, we'll go over what invoking Ra does in a bit. The third thing you can do is play a god tile. So let's say you draw a tile. And let's just say it's a Nile tile. That Nile tile would go right there when you draw it. If the next player chose to draw a tile, and they may have drawn a gold tile, and that would go right there. And they would say the next player chooses to draw, and they draw a monument tile. It would go right there. That's how those go. So what about these tiles up here? Well, these are Ra tiles. And the Ra tiles, as soon as a Ra tile goes down, the Ra tile does not go into the tracker. The Ra tile moves the sunboat up 1. There goes the sunboat. This means 2 different things here. Number 1, the sunboat is getting closer to the end here. When the sunboat reaches the end here, it ends the epic, which means we would go on to scoring up everything for the end of that epic, or would end the game if it were the 3rd epic. When the sunboat makes it here to this, we have a few things happen. We trigger the scoring. This will change from the 1st to the 2nd epic, or would go to the 3rd if you were on that. The sunboat would move back to where it was, and then the auction line would clear out here, and all these tiles would be discarded. Second thing that happens when a raw tile comes out is that an auction automatically happens. So you're like, okay, I've seen all these tiles. I don't know how we get them. Well, that is where the auctions come in. And you've seen the two ways that trigger an auction. That can be a player deciding on their turn to invoke raw, or a raw tile coming out will do that. The player that started the auction, either by drawing the raw tile or by invoking raw, will pick up raw. You are the raw player, and the raw player will go last in the auction. And the auction will start to the player to the left of the raw player and go around. How do you bid on the auction? Well, if you want to bid, you are going to use your sun discs that were here. And the value on your sun disc is what it will be. Take an example here of how this would work. We'll say that this player here wants to bid, and they are going to bid 6. That's what they want to put out there. So they would put out 6. Some other players pass, and then the raw player decides to bid 9. The player that won was the one that put down the 9. So this guy would get his 6 back. This guy here would pick up all these tiles and add them to the side of his tracker, which would normally be empty in the game, but I had stacked all of the different tiles there. This 9 would go here, and this one will flip over upside down. And this will stay flipped upside down until the end of the epic, when it would flip, and in the next epic you could use that to bid. So as you can see now, this guy here will only be able to bid on 2 more auctions on this epic, because he would end up with flipped over things. If everybody ends up with all their sun discs flipped over upside down, then that would also end the epic, because nobody would be able to bid. And so we would just, at that point, whoever won that last auction would get their stuff, and the epic would end, and the sunboat would just move back. And then at the start of the next epic, that would flip, this would flip, and then you would score up the points for everybody. And you basically get some of these nice metal tokens here. When you have the metal tokens, the ones you start off with, like these 5s, would be upside down here. Remember, you've got ways that you can lose points. You don't ever go negative. If you don't have enough points to pay a negative, you just stay at 0. You may have to make change for some of these then, because, you know, if all you have are the 5s and you lost points, you're going to have to, you know, break these 5s and make some change. So you can see there's a bit going on with this game. It's not super complicated, but there are some unusual things going on in it there. The rule book here goes over a lot and can go over all this for you and help you with all of that to make sure that you're doing it all properly. And this is a game that'll probably take, especially the first time that you play it, or if you have a lot of new people, can take a little bit of time to get through it. It says that it's a 30 to 60 minute game, and that's probably pretty typical for it, but with a bunch of new players, it can take a bit to go through it and a bit to learn. So just make sure you set a little bit extra time for that first time you go through it, because the game does have a little bit of a learning curve to it to be able to pick it up and play it. But it is a fun game. I really like the Pharaoh version here, which has a lot of nice components. The one thing that changed on this, which really doesn't change all that much realistically, the one big change on here was that they introduced the sunboat into this. Now, originally what would happen is when a raw tile was drawn, the original board looked more like this here, and there's not much difference. The only difference are the little pictures of the sunboat up here. So I don't even know why they bothered to make it differently. But when the raw tile came out, it just sat in the spot there. And the tracker basically just had raw tiles stack up here and move it along over the raw tracker. They decided, instead of doing the raw tiles there, that you could have the sunboat, which moves along instead. And you can see that the sunboat and the raw tiles have the same, pretty much the same thing going on them there. It's the same graphic on it. So really, the Sunboat just kind of added another little piece in there, but doesn't really change anything on the game. It's a game that's a really sharp looking game. Looks really nice, especially this Pharaoh version. And I think it's just a really fun game once you get it down. So what do you think of this game? Do you think I did a decent job explaining this game, or are you still confused? Well, you can go down into the comment section and let me know. Either way, you can also give this video a thumbs up and a like to let me know that you liked it. That helps me out a lot. And you can also subscribe to my channel. Make sure that you don't miss anything so that you catch all the videos. I'm Jeremy with To the Tabletop, and we'll see you around next time.